Yo. Welcome back. Welcome back. So, what is the price of empathy and caring? This is a question I've been pondering for the last several weeks. It's really odd to live in a world where the attributes of insight, sensitivity, and compassion are looked at as such anomalies that those of us who actually try to consider other people's feelings in that matter are considered like left-wing extremists. We are in the month of May, but in April, a number of societal shifts had taken place. A white man with an ego the size of a moon decided to take on the challenge of reframing the idea of freedom of thoughts and expression. Now, the ironic thing is by listening to that particular description, it's really hard to determine who I'm talking about, which makes the statement even more fascinating. Well, maybe this will help. This white man decided that the best way to increase his profile was to take on an endeavor that, while yes, giving him a much decided spotlight he so craved, trumpeting the idea that his actions are designed to free the subject matter in question. By doing so, though, he thought may have been a little bit more foolhardy than originally thought because the subject entity will cost a multi-billion-dollar bill. You still don't know what I'm talking about. All right, let me try this again. So this white man is being trumpeted by scores of people on the right who are tired of left-wing conglomerates controlling their freedom of expression and trying to indoctrinate society with their left-wing thoughts. Still having a hard time deciphering who I'm talking about? What about this? He most recently was profiled by the Wall Street Journal as an intellectual thought provocateur. Okay, last one. This man is not doing this because he cares about the goodwill of people. No, he's doing this really as an exhibition of ego and power. Yeah, I can see why you're having a hard time trying to figure out who this person is or actually decipher which person I'm talking about. Because oddly enough, both Elon Musk and Governor DeSantis have been on a conservative tidal wave as of late, running a gamut on their opposition, using power and prestige to push through their objective, and almost a perpendicular race of who can be the most powerful man on the planet, with DeSantis aiming for the White House in 2024, and Elon aiming for, well, what seems to be like a modern-day Bond villain. Elon, of course, taking on the world's biggest intellectual thought platform by trying to purchase it and ostensibly change how communication ideas are exchanged, citing freedom as his optimum objective, saying that Twitter has operated with a left-wing slanted program. And of course, DeSantis willingly trying to take on the biggest media conglomerate in Disney by fashioning them as an indoctrinating left-wing bias in their programming. Wait, that sounds weird. It's almost like there's this quiet war campaign that's happening right in front of our eyes, with powerful white men pushing conservative talking points, narratives, and winning the messaging war. But they do bring up a fascinating question. What is freedom in exchange? Is society being conditioned to regulate proper ideals of communication? And why does it seem like this newfound conservative push for freedom has an underlying tone of anti-blackness? Could it be because while the governor trampesing across the country building up his national profile is simultaneously and quietly destroying black voting districts and fighting against federal ruling that prohibited Florida's racist voting laws? Or Elon trying to usher in a wave of right-wing conservatives who argue that their views, no matter how bigoted and racist, should be allowed to not only express themselves freely, but most importantly, engage, troll, and intimidate those who think differently. What does this freedom that both men claim society is lacking look like for the surrounding world, and in particular black folk? Should freedom be at the detriment of the human compassion? Should freedom be the opposite side of human decency? Should freedom be weird? Should be a weird calling card for the right-wing extremism? Is that really what freedom is? Freedom to inflict harm no matter what the cost? It literally costs you nothing to be a decent human being. But even in that, there are those who say that the price of compassion should be no greater than their own self-interest. So in reality, the question shouldn't be whether freedom is the new age, whether freedom is the new age war. The real question is, what does the true intrinsic value of free look like to us? What's free? Welcome to Uncultured Bias Podcast. My name is Camara Williams. I'm your host. On our show, we say that culture is a matter of perspective and opinion. After all, culture is another way to say discovery. We're uncultured, real bias, and real black. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. If you are listening, a returning listener, welcome back. So, whether you're returning or a first-time listener, we just ask that you guys continue to share this podcast with your friends, family, colleagues, even people you don't like. We don't care. Just share the podcast. If you're listening on Apple, go on to the Apple podcast website or on your app and go ahead and leave a rating, whether a 5-star rating, leave a review. It's a way for Apple to engage and to see how you engage and how people are interacting with this podcast. So if we're going to give a shout out to our sponsors this week, giving a big shout out to Coleman Law. You can reach them at 850-597-2990 if you're looking for a tax attorney or people who are if you're a person who's dealing with some tax issues or business issues, please contact Coleman Law at 850-597-2990 or www.coleman.law. If you're in the market for real estate, contact Keystone Global Real Estate at 407-680-8510. Of course, KeystoneGlobalRealEstate.com. And of course, if you're in the market for trust, wills, guardianship, estate planning, all that fun stuff, contact Smith & Williams Trial Group. You can reach us at 888-798-4529 or 888-SWTG Law. And of course, SWTGlaw.com and cwilliams at SWTGlaw.com. All right, brilliant. Let's get into our guest. And I'm actually going to start off with, I got two incredible, dynamic young women that are going to join me on this podcast. I'm going to start off with Camille. And she is a founder and partner of Virtuous Legal Group. Camille, you still with us?
I'm here. Good afternoon.
How you doing? How you feel?
I'm doing great. Can't complain. Can't complain.
All right. Tell me a little bit about your situation, your law group and everything.
Who I am and why I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, first, Camara, let me thank you for having me on. I'm very glad that you are taking up this space, sharing your thought leadership. It's important to amplify voices like yours. So thank you for taking up this space and occupying this platform. My name is Camille Evans. I'm an attorney here in Orlando. I have the benefit of having co-founded Virtus LLP with Hope Newsom. We are a business and finance boutique law firm. We are based here in Windermere, Florida. We serve financial institutions, governments, entrepreneurs, and small businesses, and all things business and finance. The majority of my practice is focused on representing governments and banks in the issuance and lending of municipal debt on both a private and public basis.
All right, perfect. And for those who are dumb like me, that means she handles big money, and especially she has a large history in bonds. So we're going to talk about bond debt with the purchasing of trying to purchase bond debt and how that actually applies not only to Florida but also what Elon was trying to do. All right, our next special guest is Tiffany Spencer, and she is the founder and creator of HBCU Force, as well as are you founder or board member of the Black Orlando Tech?
So today I'm a board member.
Okay.
I was not the founder, but I helped to kind of start or help guide us from being just a meetup group, and actually did the 501c3 certification for us and moved us from just a meetup group into an actual nonprofit.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about HBCU Force.
Yeah, so I'm Tiffany Spencer. I'm actually the founder and executive director of what's now called Tech Forward.
Okay.
Tech Forward started in 2019 as HBCU Force because the original idea was to expose HBCU students to careers in the Salesforce ecosystem. And today, Tech Forward is a nonprofit organization that exposes marginalized communities to cloud and SaaS-based technologies and career paths to help participants be more marketable, obtain higher paying jobs and career opportunities. I am also, or was, the co-founder and COO of eSOAR Consulting Group, which is a Salesforce implementation partner. And our company was recently acquired by Bitwise Industries. So technically today I'm the VP of Salesforce Partnerships for Bitwise Industries. And then I'm the board chair for Black Orlando Tech, which started out as a meetup group. So I was really not the founder or one of the co-founders. But there were a few people in Orlando that got together, decided they wanted to, have Black people meet up in Orlando because people have this impression that there's not a Black tech scene there. And so I was the president for a few years, helped to get us more organized, and now I'm the board chair.
All right, wonderful. And then honestly, Tiffany, I wanted you to be on here because I know you you mentioned it, but just to really emphasize that you have a lot of interest and focus on the tech, and I'm sure you have opinions on what's happening, not only what's happening on social media, but also specifically with Elon trying to purchase, and what does that mean for just communication and just creatives in that space and just Black expression. So let's get right into it, man. First of all, guys, thank you guys for joining, jumping on this podcast. And I'm going to start off with you, Camille. And I know we mentioned with DeSantis and everything that was going on with him trying to, in the last month, trying to, I guess, take on Disney, and then finding out later on that their bond debt and everything like that. So if you can kind of walk us through, like, what does that mean? I know that Disney had instituted a proclamation saying that, listen, this is this rule was put in 1967, so we're kind of grandfathered in, and so therefore, if this is going to be instituted, there is going to have to be a debt paid. Am I correct on that?
So I think the best way to focus on it and frame the issue, Camara, is that the Reedy Creek Improvement District, the iteration that exists today, was established by a special act of the legislature. And in that special act, they granted the property owners of Reedy Creek, which of course, by and large, is Walt Disney World Companies, or a holding thereof, the right to provide special limited purpose governmental powers. And the reason why they do that, and let me pause and say, before we go any further, that is a structure that is used globally, nationally, and throughout Florida. I think right now, Florida has about 1,800 special districts in existence. Wow. And, that doesn't include those that have been dissolved. And they are created for various different reasons. Sometimes it's for the provision of utilities. Sometimes it's for community development. And sometimes they have broader powers, but still short of what our normal governmental powers are. And the idea is that these districts allow us to properly tailor the needs of that district to the infrastructure that is built to support it. And that's why it's an efficient strategy utilized, because if you had a local government that was focused on serving the entirety of Orange County and then also the entirety of Osceola County, you have those two separate entities in and of themselves. Right. But then them having disjointed approaches to how they regulate and develop and support the infrastructure needs of that large district, that footprint that Disney takes on. So it's a very common and significant strategy for tailoring government. The obvious criticism that can be received is that you kind of create this self-governing entity, right, that allows you to do what you want. But of course, every governmental entity within the state is limited at some point to the powers that the Constitution and or the statutes authorize. So it's not the wild, wild west. Right. And so what happens is that every government in Florida and throughout the world will utilize debt as a strategy to finance their improvements. For example, you might need new roads and you don't have the however many $100 million you need today to finance that entire project.
Talking about like cash on hand. That's what you're saying. Like,
right. You don't have cash on hand to do it. And as well, I'm sure you're aware that sometimes it's not wise to put cash on everything when you can utilize other money, right?
OPM.
OPM runs the world. Right. So, so what happens is that you end up in a scenario where they've issued debt, and it's very important to understand there are many different classes of debt, but there are key elements that you have to have. You have to have a borrower, you have to have a lender, right, you have to have an amount, you have to have a repayment plan, and you have to have the security for that debt. And that security for that debt is where all the bells and whistles come in. And that's where you basically tie up cross all the T's, dot all the I's to make an investor confident that they are going to actually receive repayment of the funds that they've loaned out, plus interest. And so what happens is, to make sure that in a governmental capacity, you don't run into a scenario where a government can just, wave their wand and turn around and make their debt disappear. You have various covenants built in that provide that when you create a special district, the entity that creates that special district covenants that there will not be a dissolution of that district without a demonstrated plan, an approved plan to accommodate the obligations. It's similar to how in a regular contract you would have a limited right for assignment.
Right.
I'm not just going to let anybody take on my debt.
Right. And so it's designed to protect, let's say, the state or the local government from like, all right, this person's like, all right, we no longer need this property or this area, so we're gonna go ahead and balance it. Like, whoa, wait, y'all got some things to kind of tie up.
Well, so actually, in the financial perspective, the first party that's being protected is the investor. So that's the lender.
Right.
So, I mean, that's really what the safety mechanism is there for, to prevent them from having nobody to have recourse against. Number two, the other idea that it protects the district itself in its own existence is in some way, realistic, because it needs to be a viable entity. Just like when you're doing anything in the corporate realm, you're going to do a review of the due diligence and the viability of that entity, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing happens to governmental entities. And so you need to make sure that it's legitimate from a contracting perspective. You need to make sure it's legitimate from various different, regulatory perspectives.
What is a bond for those who are ignorant?
Great question. And I usually start there, so I probably should have started there. So a bond is the same thing as the mortgage note you sign when you buy a house, right? When anyone buys a house and they get a mortgage, there's actually a note, a promissory note.
Right.
And in the case of a mortgage, we promise to pay certain dollars. And if we don't turn around and pay, the mortgage company has the right to repossess the house, to foreclose on the lien on the house.
Right.
In the case of bonds, because governments receive so many different types of revenues and assets, they're able to create what we call different bond programs. So you might have one based on sales tax revenues, one based on tourist development tax revenues, one based on parking revenues, what have you. And what it happens is, say we are the city of Orlando and we need to build a fire station. And we're going to borrow the money from a bank. The bank, in turn, we give them a bond, just like we would have done in the mortgage. Instead of a note, we're giving them a bond.
Right.
But similar to stocks that are publicly traded, in a publicly traded capacity, bonds are actually broken down. So you might have $10 million in bonds, but then you break them down into $5,000 denominations. And those small pieces are then traded on the public market.
Gotcha.
And so it's an IOU that has been baked, and all the terms that regard it are locked in and is supposed to remain in existence for whatever that life of that debt is. So as long as it's being traded, as long as it's a live debt, it's traded on the open market. And me as an investor can be confident when I'm buying that bond 7 years, 10 months from however long ago it was initially issued, that the terms are the same.
Gotcha. All right. So, and I'm going to bring you in a little bit, Tiffany. I just wanted one more follow-up question, because I'm not like Chuck Todd. I actually ask follow-up questions here. So when you saw that the foolishness that was happening in Tallahassee and then Disney silently sent it out to their investors, right, that, the bond had to be paid back. Explain that to are you familiar with that note that they sent out?
Yes. Yeah, okay. I'm familiar with it, but I will tell you that Disney's position in this is just one at play.
Right.
You have to think about it. If the district has approximately not just shy of $1 billion in outstanding bonds, that means they have bondholders who have positions that are going to entitle them to pursue remedies in the case their debt is being in any way breached.
First priority creditors. First priority creditors.
Basically,
Yeah.
exactly. And in this case, I told you about how bonds are broken down into smaller pieces,
Right.
and you and I can buy them, but the other people who buy them are the funds, the insurance companies,
Right.
the municipal bond funds. They buy them and they hold very large positions.
Right.
And it is not uncommon for them to make preventative steps to pursue litigation. So it's not just Reedy Creek pursuing strategies to defend the action of the legislature, but it's also the various bondholders. And remind you, each series of bonds has a majority bondholder, or each type of bonds, I should say, has a majority bondholder or multiple. So there are a number of different brilliant analysts and lawyers who are looking at this. But to your point about the quickness of the process, and just the fact that there is so much that usually would need to take steps. The problem is that the legislature acted without having done a fiscal analysis, without doing anything that is normally a part of a standard legislative process.
Right.
And all of those things are not just bells and whistles for show. They're actually implemented to make sure that we are passing legislation that works.
Right.
In a normal sense, in a normal process, we would not be at the point of dissolution without having had extensive conversations with outstanding investors, with the resulting receiving entities, the Orange County, Osceola County,
right.
The staff, the other stakeholders. Remember, this government is still a representative of the people.
Right.
So there are stakeholders like the firefighters who are members of the Reedy Creek employment. So with all of that having been skipped, it is no surprise that they built in 14 months to allow the dissolution before the sunset actually happens.
Right.
Because everybody knows that this is absolutely a political grandstanding more than it is the end result.
Absolutely.
And I think it's not ironic, and I'm not going to steal your thunder, that you've looped these two topics together, because right now the world is chomping at the bit at grandstanding definitive steps that have not closed.
Right.
And so, we're fired up, but there's lots of different pieces. And I personally wouldn't be surprised if two things. Lastly, and I'll shut up. The number one, that the investing public will continue to have a very harsh scrutiny of this fact pattern, because as I mentioned, you have 1,800 other special districts. Not that they all have outstanding debt,
right?
But if and one of I think Fitch sent an alert out. The state made a statement saying, it was one of the rating agencies saying that they placed Reedy Creek on negative watch because they are concerned about the political environment that will just dissolve a district without resolving the underlying responsibilities in advance.
Right.
That's big, because if that carries a underwriting drag, the cost of capital for other special districts in the state of Florida could be similar, could be very negatively impacted.
Right.
And then go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I'm rocking with you. Keep going. It's good.
No, and I was going to say, the last thing that I also expect is that you're not going to have a scenario where you're going to get a lot of other corporate entities to stand up and say something, because of the nature of the grandstanding that, occurs. So nobody wants to be the next hand that gets smacked.
Right.
But to me, it seems that it's going to be critical to see how the rest of the world either accommodates or says, no, we can't do this. If it stays and it actually dissolves, I think you'll probably end up with some level of an interlocal agreement between Osceola and Orange counties that recreates another district similar to Reedy Creek.
Right. So first of all, that was fire. That was great, because for a lot of people, they're like, I don't know what's happening. And I think this is important to have this, technical understanding of what's happening before we have the political conversation or the social conversation. We need a basis of like what's actually the idea behind Reedy Creek and the bond issue and the debt and all that. So Tiffany, I'm going to loop you in here, and I'm going to preface this by saying how Camille ended. We understand that, not ended because obviously still here, but how that portion of the explanation, how she talked about there was a lot of political grandstanding. And I did a quick video. I said, like, honestly, as Camille mentioned, there in June 2023 is when this is actually supposed to be instituted. So the idea behind that was, in my opinion, was after midterms, right? Conveniently, and after the legislative session, in 2023. So a lot of things have to happen, including, Republicans come back and be like, we were just joking. We're going to kind of pull that, we're going to repeal that law, or we're going to take some teeth out of it, or we're going to, or we're totally just going to ignore that it ever happened and blase squaze. But in your opinion, how did you see like all that political grandstanding happening? Because we kind of, anybody with like two eyes, two ears, even a nose can see, hear, and smell the bullshit that was emanating from Tallahassee. Can we, Tiff, you here?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
All of that it was really interesting to hear Camille go through all of that information. And from my standpoint, we work a lot with the Orlando Economic Partnership. And so I know the effort that those organizations put into actually recruiting companies to Orlando and to Florida. And so I know one of the things that companies and businesses do not like is instability.
Right.
And so the fact that he would, in a sense, go against what Republicans are truly say they're for, right? Business and bringing money to the districts. For him to basically go against those efforts is really interesting to me. And one of the things that I asked a friend is that, how do those numbers play out for him? If Disney, how much money do you think Disney would actually put up to basically go against or go after DeSantis for this move? Like, is that something Disney's going to do? I know they're not going to publicize that, but is that something, and can he handle that? Like, what are the actual repercussions of this, not only for this election, but long term? Are businesses now going to say, I don't know about this? If this is how DeSantis is going to play, I may not move my headquarters there, because the same type of thing that he's trying to go, do away with, they may need in order to, or that might be something governments and local organizations are trying to use to get companies to move. And so I just don't understand, as far as dollars and cents, how this benefits DeSantis and the Republican Party in Florida, or is it not really, will it not impact them?
Well, actually, I think it actually benefits DeSantis. It may not benefit the Republican Party, but it benefits DeSantis in one way, because it enhances his national profile. Let's talk about dollars and cents here. So you talked about, number one, Disney, I believe, in my opinion, and you guys can chime in here, is not going to respond politically to this, because they're not in the business of making political statements. They're an international conglomerate, and they understand that the wave of
I meant with their money.
Pardon?
Respond with their money, not an actual statement.
Right, yeah, but I even think they may not even respond monetarily to this, because I think they're going to let this, the winds die down a little bit. They may, do some slick things here and there, but they're not going to be in a position of trying to take hard and fast political positions, because they understand that they got to make money on both sides of the aisle, as far as people who are, interested in spending Disney dollars. And so for me, I look at it like Disney's like, this is a lot of hot air. A lot of things have to happen, as Camille stated. A lot of moving parts before this scheme. We understand this is a political ploy in order to enhance DeSantis. Well, I said enhance DeSantis because, let's talk dollars and cents. Let's say Disney maxed out their donation at $50,000 to him, to his campaign. He's looking at it like, I don't need the $50,000 if I can get, $5 million from national donors who look at me as this, paramour of right-wing ideology. And so he's like, I can go against the big bad wolf of, Disney and frame them as this left-wing bastion of intellectual thought, and that, it was against us. And this, so it's like, I actually can help. There's no such thing as bad press, right? There's good press enhances the profile. Now, Republicans, on the other hand, they're not seeing, they can't see the forest from the trees at this point, because it's like, that's not really the smart thing. But of course, they're not the leader of the party, DeSantis is. So they have to kind of march along to the beat of what their, king is saying in the state of Florida. And so I believe, to answer that question, I think it's a little bit more complicated, but I think this is more or less about DeSantis and less about Republican Party. Do you agree, Tiffany? And, you can chime in on that.
Well, I was going to say, I agree. I think that this is absolutely, 2024 strategy.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I have to say it's a heck of a game of chess, because, the number one, you took the entire spotlight away from the fact that at the same time you were eliminating 50% of the Black congressional districts in the
Right.
state of Florida,
Right.
through a procedure that was absolutely inconsistent with the law and process that has been outlined. You've proven that you have the absolute will of your state legislature to do whatever you say, whenever you get good and ready.
Right.
And at the same time, you have done nothing but given the biggest high five to your base. Right. And I think it's super ironic that he made the announcement that they were going to put Reedy Creek's dissolution on the special on the special session agenda while standing in the Villages.
Yeah.
And the Villages is his base. Right. But you know what also is the Villages? The Villages is a community based on 17 plus special districts.
Yeah.
All of which have outstanding debt. Right. All of which have the same investors who probably have Reedy Creek paper, have Villages paper. And so it's that level of instability. To your point, Camara, you're spot on. This is a DeSantis play. Now, how far everybody's going to let that instability go is the next big question. Unfortunately, I think that history shows us that it can go much further than we all think that it should be before somebody's ready to raise their hand.
Yeah, yeah.
And then similar to what you were saying before with the whole Twitter deal, that deal is also not done. Right. And so there's a ton of think pieces and reactions to a deal that I don't know how far out before it's actually signed. And there's already reports coming out that Musk has already violated the terms of the initial agreement. And right. So even that is really just interesting when you look at, did he really want to buy Twitter and other aspects of, does what he's saying that he's doing this for free speech really aligned with Musk's history with quote unquote free speech? And is that really the play?
Right. So
there's reports coming out. Go ahead.
No. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. My apologies. Keep going, Tiff.
No, I was going to say, people are focusing on Twitter and the free speech, which I think is a risk. Right. The other bigger thing, though, is this idea of billionaires buying communication and media platforms.
Yeah.
And Twitter has a lot of data. Right. And so we might be focusing all on the wrong thing if this deal even goes through.
Right. So actually, let's put a pin on that one because I do want to explore. That's a really good conversation, and I want to get into that. But Tiffany, I want to keep in this Twitter space, though, because I do find it fascinating of Elon trying to purchase Twitter, and the idea that Twitter is a free platform. So, and so the idea that he's purchasing something that, people jump on in order, for freedom, and, they don't have to pay a fee. It's like, what is the value? And I'm going to preface it by saying this. I'm explaining what I believe the value is in Black Twitter. It's been saying that for the last 2 weeks, how Black Twitter actually raised the value of Twitter because it's the centrifuge of thought and even hilarity. And, it's often where even politics and social issues, when things break around the world, it's usually Twitter that is the first, is the first entity that starts, creating this narrative. There's an old adage they say on social media, old, as you say, but Twitter sees it first, Instagram takes a picture of it second, and Twitter sees it first, Instagram takes a picture of it second, TikTok makes a video of it, and then Facebook finds out about it a week later. And so, so Twitter is weird because honestly, it has the less amount of viewers, users. I think Facebook, and then there's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and then Twitter. But it is the leading communicative device around the world, which I don't, am I accurate with that, Tiff?
So it's interesting, right? So as you said, if you talk to the young people today, Facebook is definitely not leading because
Right.
I've been told by my mentee that Facebook is for the old folks.
Right.
She tells me I'm a member of the Facebook generation. And so the young people, I know, right, rude. The young people are using Snapchat and TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, Twitter is definitely for a certain demographic, news travels fast. But if you want to go back to what he's actually saying, right, where is the value? So one, it's very up in the air, right? Because what he has said, and I think he just tweeted yesterday, is that by free speech, he means that, that which simply matches the law. And that he's saying that I am against censorship that goes far beyond the law. And so if people want less free speech, they will ask the government to pass laws to that effect.
Right.
And therefore, he feels like Twitter was going beyond the will of the people. But First Amendment rights don't apply to private companies, right? And so the other thing he has said is about Twitter being less of a company and a profit machine and more like a utility. That doesn't match, right? Because a public utility
is regulated.
Has taxes. Yes, it's
Right.
regulated.
Right.
And so none of that matches.
Right.
And so if you go again, what is the value here? And yes, I think there's a couple places where he's going to want to maybe utilize Twitter, right? So one is going to be to get his word out, right? Or be able to see where people are, what's trending, what are people liking, right? It's all in the data and how it's used. If you talk about the upcoming election,
Right.
if you talk about his own AI and robots that he's trying to train and, work on. So there's so many ways that he could possibly utilize Twitter if the sale goes through.
I want to walk into that, but I want to do the tie-in here with DeSantis and the idea that both of these people have made plays in talking about freedom of speech, right? And then so DeSantis, obviously, he got mad with Disney making a comment on the Republican initiative of their bill, of the quote unquote, don't say gay bill, and punishing them for the freedom of their statement, and talking about First Amendment, and then using his platform, his power, position to essentially try to take away their expression on how their actions. And in the same token, you have somebody like Elon Musk, who has taken on this tiki torch of trying to promote this quote unquote freedom of expression. However, it's really the freedom of expression for a certain group, because they feel like they've been isolated out of a space. And I want you and Camille, I want you to chime in on here too. Do you guys see that there's a kind of like a weird, like it's like a weird amalgamation of like this push towards trying to identify what exactly is freedom of speech, right? Do you guys see what I'm saying?
It's like freedom of speech with no consequences is what I hear him trying to say. But at the same time, he has blocked people on Twitter. He tried to buy out the young man that was tracking his jet. And so it's like, I want to be able to promote and say what I want with no consequence, except when I don't like it. And
Right.
so
Right.
it's very weird to say, what is that? What is actual free speech? And he also said that he wanted to get rid of the bots. Well, I read a Twitter comment and somebody said, well, if the bots are made by people, isn't that free speech too? Even if it's coming from a bot. And
Right.
so
Right.
it's
Right.
like,
I have to say, I think that Tiffany's spot on. So free speech is a very convenient cause to throw all your resources behind. Even if you can't agree with my tactics, my mission should be beyond reproach, right? If I am preserving this absolute best, important interest for us as people. But as Tiffany pointed out earlier, what he's actually buying is the value of what access to people and their opinions and forming those opinions and understanding the rate at which different types of messages carry and how they carry and to whom they carry. And, you know, Camara, you mentioned the value of Black Twitter and how but that respectfully, and I love that. And I agree respectfully, that also shows you the value of your echo chamber that Twitter supports, because of the fact that if you have that Black Twitter, you also have Ukrainian Twitter. Yeah. You also have Eastern African Twitter. You also have, you name it, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so you're getting all of that, and you're getting the ability to inform it, shape it, sell it, all those things. And so I think this is absolutely a play for control.
Right.
And also what you get to see when you have a lot of money and a lot of things to leverage, or a lot of OPM.
Right.
and you get to play with that at a different level. And I will say one other thing. This is also politically perfectly timed on the same trajectory. This takes you into midterm elections.
Yeah.
This takes you, because I think the scheduled closing is October. So this takes you right into midterm elections. And also it gives him a great narrative. If the deal falls through, Twitter has to pay him $1 billion. If Twitter walks, Twitter has to pay him $1 billion. If he walks, he has to pay Twitter $1 billion.
Right.
Do he look worried about $1 billion? No. But if he's able to get the narrative that Twitter walked from him on $1 billion, then you have all those stockholders who are currently looking at a premium payout, who are now going to have to not have it, and he's going to have the benefit of whatever platform he decides to take.
Right.
And I think also you have to remember, Facebook's got Meta.
Yeah.
Your boy needs he needs his metaverse. He needs something in that realm to leverage.
Right. So because I do want to talk about the financing here. That is really interesting. But I want to point out something you said very key here, Camille. Is the curating of message and curating of power, right? And so the power of freedom of speech. So again, you have Elon, who is trying to purchase, ideally people's, Black Twitter, Ukrainian Twitter, African Twitter, whatever Twitter, there is, right? And saying that I'm trying to curate like what is identifiably freedom of speech. And then you have the same way on the other end, again, just making a quick tie in here, that you have DeSantis trying to curate what exactly is proper speech, in advancement of our issues, like what is proper speech and what is proper reaction. And so you have these two entities kind of having these weird conversations surrounding what they deem as proper communication in exchange of ideas. And we're in a very tenuous part of our world where you have these two men, and then people behind them really trying to curate and tell the world, this is what I think is proper speech. And I feel like people have to really pay attention to that. So moving on to like I'm sorry if you unless you guys want to comment on that.
I would just say, we've all read about this and read articles about this on platforms that other billionaires, multi-millionaires own.
Right.
So this is not new. And also I think, I can't articulate her point as well, but you have to read Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, and the way she talks about the parallels between the strategies utilized in the Jim Crow South, and then the way that the Third Reich, there you go, studied us and doubled down on certain things and did all the things to normalize the instability that we all are right now shuddering at.
Yeah. That's a fascinating thought. I never thought about it. Like, the caste system of communication. That's fascinating. I didn't even really, I want to kind of peel that away a little bit. So like when you hear about the caste system of communication, let's explore that. What do you feel about that? Like, what do you mean by that?
It's well, specific in caste, it talks about, the articles that became the type of things that news media would print and talk about that normalize the discrimination, that normalize the systemic hierarchy and the caste system.
Yeah.
But also, think about it from a politics perspective or knowledge and shit. How much stuff my kids tell me they learned off TikTok?
Yeah.
Oh, here, I'm gonna do this right quick. I learned it off of TikTok. And they learned it in TikTok in 30 seconds?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're very short blurb. Most of us probably learned that Elon bought Twitter.
Right.
On Twitter, on Facebook, on Insta, on whatever. And we learned about it. And that was all was that he bought Twitter for $44 billion.
Right.
Nobody knows that he is in an agreement until you click to that next level of information. I think that's kind of like a caste level, like how informed do you require your people to be participating members of this community, and to have an informed opinion about it. Like, I know he bought Twitter because that's what Twitter told me.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that there's a whole another 6+ months of due diligence, documenting, negotiation, performance, structuring deals. Perhaps the fact that he's got to also leverage $22 billion out of Tesla.
Right.
All of those things are still real and have to occur. But that, like, by the time we get to a broken deal, however many months from now, if that happens, nobody will care. All they'll know is that Elon tried to buy Twitter and they wouldn't let him.
Right. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tiff. You wanted to chime in here.
And I was going to say part of what that lends itself to is what is moderation, right? The content moderation and the algorithm, which is what the whole Fix the Feed movement is about, right? And the Change the Terms coalition, where that is, the fixing of the algorithm or disclosing the business model and the moderation practices, because like Camille is saying, why is that showing up in your feed more than maybe something else? Maybe there was an article about the fact that this was just a purchase agreement, but based on the algorithm, that's not pushed up. And so when you talk about a caste system and what information is deemed more valuable than others, that's the whole problem that people were having with Facebook. That's the concern around Twitter. And that is actually part of, I believe, what happens in China today. Like Musk is building a Tesla plant or is in talks to build a Tesla plant in China. China doesn't have free speech.
Right.
But they like some wealthy people, say some things that are, not nice about the government, but not everybody. And so you get to kind of that type of caste perspective as well when you're looking at, if we're not clear on what are the moderation policies and how does the AI work?
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So and Tiffany, I'm interested in, so one of the things they say that, with the idea that he buys Twitter, that Twitter's going to go private, and being private would ultimately allow them to focus on long-term projects like implementing this, greater free speech, hopefully fixing the feed. And my question for you is, and I know that they say Twitter's, revenue is mostly ad-based. If we fix the feed and if we, adjust the algorithm or open it up to a more public, platform, do you hamper the ability to be successful with ads? And if that's the case, are you going to negatively impact the financial performance of the company?
And so that's interesting, right? There's been a few articles written about how, Musk broke the rules when he paid that amount of cash for, Twitter. And so how is that even going to work as far as business revenue? One of the things that came out when Facebook changed their algorithm is that it broke the way that that some companies were getting kind of just natural views of their content. And so those companies had to pay more to get their content out. And so it's interesting. It depends on what he's talked about is more of like this membership and paying for certain things. And so if he doesn't want the ad revenue, then the only way he can have some sort of a revenue is more of a membership based model, or for you to pay for certain features. I don't know if that's going to be the same amount of revenue coming in, but that's one way to do it. I think the ad, if you if you remove the bots and you fix the algorithm, people are still going to pay for ads. It's just the amount of money they may need to spend for the ads to be more visible. So I know on Facebook, like if you ever pay for ads on Facebook versus LinkedIn, LinkedIn ads are extremely expensive. But they're expensive because there's a lot of data. You can really dig deep. I think for me, a little bit deeper than Facebook. Mm-hmm. I spend less money on Facebook ads than LinkedIn ads. And then that's also an audience thing. Maybe LinkedIn values their, they feel like they have more accurate data because of the type of people that are on LinkedIn. Yeah. And so I think that his ad model is going to be closer to Facebook, but it could possibly be more profitable if he can say, look, I verified these people and I don't have bots, that my data is more accurate and therefore your ads are going to be more successful.
Okay. So I saw something interesting about the monetization, and I don't know if this is true or not, and Camille or Tiffany, you can chime in on this. One of the buy-ins he got from investors, because again, people think like Elon just had $44 billion laying around, and no, he actually had to your point, I've heard 21, you've said $22 billion. You needed to actually put up his own money, and part of that was his Tesla stock, and why Tesla, dived at the end of April because of all the fluidity of his passion project of buying Twitter. But one of the things his buy-ins of getting investors was saying that he was going to monetize tweets, particularly in the idea of charging a fee for quoting tweets or embedded tweets. And my thought process was like, I don't know if anybody's going to want to pay, they've been used for over a decade of doing this for free. And is it something to where they're like, all right, now I'm going to be willing to pay to quote somebody or to put an embedded link within my tweet? Or are we the human condition has been so, that we're so used to doing something like, all right, it's kind of like Netflix, just add extra dollar on there. I don't care. Add $2 extra on there. Like, do you think the human condition will be like, no, I'm good. I'm going to another platform. Or do you think like people will pay the money because they're so used to this way of communicating?
So I'm going to say, I think behaviorally, Tiffany probably knows better how this happens. But my guess generally is that elasticity of demand. We will not pay more than X for something until we decide we're going to pay more than X for something.
Right.
I wouldn't dare pay certain prices for things. But then I get in the airport terminal and I'm like, it's whatever. I need this bottle of water or, what I need. Or, to your point on Netflix, I have no idea what I pay on a month on Netflix. Right. I started so long ago. Right. But if you ask me, I'm going to be highly offended. My guess is that for that to work, and I don't know tech behavior as well, but my guess is for that to work, you're going to have to get it mainstream. You're going to have to get people to just do a basic subscription where they have the right to do those retweets, reposts, whatever. Because if you do it on like a per whatever basis, you're going to lose, I think, traction. Although I don't know, you have like the Fortnite model where they get a certain amount of cash. But again, I think your user base on Twitter, like, I don't see me signing up for that. And I don't think a lot of people will. I darn sure don't see my kids signing up to pay for social media.
Yeah, it's built in. So they already started where if you pay, I think $1 a month, you could edit your tweets. So that's already a thing. Okay. And so, and you got to think too, like you said about your kids in Fortnite, one of the things that you're already seeing in technology is this idea of monetization, right? If you think about NFTs, which is basically like a GIF or a JPEG, a picture of something that you can now sell, that kind of model where our kids are in this like virtual world and paying for these little pieces of assets, that type of mentality is already being bred into everything that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so that's been a long time coming. That's not something that's new. It's more newer to, I think, our generation and above, where you're like, dang, something else. But at the same time, we also pay a membership fee for things we don't use, like gyms. And like I was just looking today,
significantly higher prices.
Fees, yeah, that are coming out that I need to cancel that I haven't canceled. And so the idea is if you buy it to try it out, you're going to forget to cancel it, right? Mm-hmm. And so memberships are always a good business model. And so I think that people will, with added benefits, they're not going to pay directly for that, but it has to be some sort of added benefits and the idea of monetization, right? And so Instagram, TikTok, there's already monetization on those platforms. Twitter's already added Twitter Spaces. They are adding all of these things. And so they're moving to the model that's similar to the other platforms. And so
yeah,
it could work out.
You know, I asked the question because my answer, my gut feeling is that they understand the human capacity to want to continue to communicate. And so there's an intrinsic value of always wanting to be in the know and then always wanting to communicate ideas or be a part of that exchange of ideas. So people will, I don't know what that number is, but there is a number, and bigger brains than me have already figured out there is a number in which people will pay for that. And to the point where you mentioned, and this is where I want to take this conversation about the price of data, right? So I remember I was watching this thing on Netflix last year. I forget the show. Anyway, it's gonna kill me. But anyway, they talked about how, like, in Facebook in the 2016 election, there was this company based out of Russia, whatnot, that really took data and was curating and figure out how people's voting patterns, and it because based on their likes and like they would do things where these social media phenomena. Remember, they're not happening anymore because people caught on. But like it seemed like every week there was a challenge, right? And based off of people's involving themselves in this challenge, they were able to take data from them and be like, this person thinks this way. And then they were able to then interact, like, how does their parent, it was weird. Like, it was a spider web of like all your information and even your family. So my father, who's not even on Facebook, they had information on him based off of my interactions on social media. And so became this invaluable thing to where, like, and then a private company bought it where they couldn't even find a price, but they talk about what is the price of data? Like, the price of our information is so invaluable. They said it's going to be more than gold, especially in the future. So to your point, Tiffany, there's probably investors who looked at Elon and said that, yeah, that is a great buy because there's a lot of value that we haven't even data mined yet, as far as how people communicate, because communication is invaluable. Right? Would you agree? Yeah.
And so there are so many things that are being built or have already been built on AI. Right. And so AI is the big next wave, machine learning, all of that automation. Everything right now is about automation. And so companies have been collecting data for years, but haven't had the capacity to actually go through and analyze that data and then decide how to actually make it actionable.
Right.
And so it's not even just having the data, it's having the models to tell you what to do with that data, like the company you're mentioning, where you put a scenario behind it and say, okay, now I can categorize it and how do I apply it to voting? Now let me put this behind it and let me see how they react to my whatever I'm selling. Right. And so that data is so valuable. And so, like I said, he already has, he's already building AI models. You think about how important that is for Tesla as a company, for his AI robot that he's building, for any other random company that he decides he wants to make. That data to be able to say, this is what people are interested in, is what they're talking about. You can like tweets. Now you can dislike tweets. You can downgrade tweets. You can see in Twitter what's trending, what's not trending. You can see people's reactions to quotes. If you ever watch Billions, which I love, they did an episode where they talked about somebody wrote a program that could essentially scrub Twitter to only show certain tweets. And so that it made a company's tank stop, right? Mm-hmm. And so being able to write different programs that even manipulate what's visible in a social media platform. And so being able to have the data to play around with that, I mean,
right. And
I can't even tell you.
It's immeasurable. And to the point, though, I was thinking about how, like, in that Netflix program, they talked about it, highlighted how they controlled elections, right? And we talked about in this podcast how they were able to control messaging through those elections. And they were able to create narratives that people were like, I didn't know I thought about this until they put it in front of me. And I'm not sure a lot of people, and I joked in the beginning of my opening that Elon's trying to be a Bond villain. Well, SpaceX, which is another company owned by Elon, they recently, by the time you hear this podcast, it's been April. So last month, the end of April, they had they launched their sixth satellite in April alone. Their sixth satellite launch. So he now in 1 month. So like he literally has, I don't even know how many satellites this guy had. And I know in the beginning of the Ukrainian crisis and with Russia, there was talk about, somebody made an ask, can you move one of your satellites to help out with this? And I was like thinking like, that's really odd that we're like privatizing, communication and war to the point where this guy's like, yeah, okay, I'll move one of my satellites. And like, do we really want somebody that not only we don't know how many satellites that's monitoring God knows what, about, how our daily interactions, but also now he's going to be in control of our communication. And that is a lot of power for one person. And on top of that, he's going to have access to our data. Like, and I don't think people are really thinking this through. Like we talk about freedom, like in our exchange for us wanting to actually, and I'm not saying us, because I don't think it's not applying to me, but the people who want to be able to exchange their right-wing ideals, what are you going to be giving up in exchange for that? Like, what is the freedom that you're actually going to be, going to be taken away? Your freedom, your freedom of monitoring yourself, your freedom of, expression. Yeah. But are you really? Because he can be able to curate that expression in however way he sees it. Am I being a little bit too far off here, or what do you think, Tiffany?
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly what happened. So with that company that you were talking about, it was that coupled with the AI change. But the AI change on Facebook did is it made those extremist posts more visible because they got a lot of interaction. And that interaction on something that extreme made it more visible. And so there's repercussions on if the AI model changes, it controls what we see. And then you can take that information. If you want certain tweets more visible, then it can, for you to, like for the election, it can help skew a result a certain way. And so it is the ability to take your words, your data, to be able to use it in whatever way they see fit. And it's not just Musk. There are, if you look back, a few billionaires that have bought newspapers or communication platforms or are trying to build them. And that is the next age, is this data.
Right.
And so where people, before were very into oil and all these things, and that because they saw the value in that.
Right.
Now, as we move more digital, now they see the value in those communication platforms and the actual data to skew things certain ways. Right.
So that's really great. So like it's like before it was gold, right? That billionaires, and then it was data. I mean, excuse me. Then it was oil. Now it's data is like the new oil, like strike. And so you have someone like Jeff Bezos, who's one of the more powerful men on the planet, owns a dozen of communication, including the Washington Post, right? And then you have someone like Bloomberg, right, who owns Bloomberg News. So we have these oligarchs who are controlling like all these different forms of communication. That is like, I don't really think people will understand, like, that's not healthy. And I don't know how you stop that, but I will say this. Back, we talked about, I just mentioned how these people back in the 20s were owning all these different type of things, and how there had to be antitrust laws put in place in order to stop people from, taking over certain sectors and controlling it. And it had to be antitrust laws breaking up the amount of industry. Funny enough, to the point where that's where we got all these different newspapers in general, because they had to put in antitrust laws, and it allowed for all the different newspapers, including again in civil rights movement, they had a lot of black people were then able to start newspapers in order to get out the anti-lynching, to IDB Wells and all that. So that there's a very clear history of antitrust laws helping breaking up monopolies in our particular in this world that people now don't want. They want free industry and they want free enterprise, free again being the optimum word here. But the idea that now freedom is, we have to like govern what that freedom actually looks like. And I'll say this one last point. I was actually, and I know I'm still talking, but one last point here. I remember I was in law school, and I was second year, and this guy who does corporate law came to talk to us. And he said, he's a corporate lawyer. And at the time when Exxon was doing a merger with another, forget what gas company, and he was working on that deal. And he's like, and he said, I'm working on that. I just got done dealing with AT&T. He was a big wig in DC. And he said, I find it fascinating that people are like always so great to see like they like mergers. And he said, I don't understand that. He said, I don't think people understand the idea of mergers. And he said, when mergers happen, the public hurts. He said, it pays my bills. It's great, but I'm on one side of it. But the idea that mergers actually help society, he said, is really, there's no basis of that. In fact, it curates pricing and it actually takes away a market. And, you see people with Spirit Airlines and Spirit and forget the other airline that's they're joining. It's like people don't understand that that's actually not a good thing. So now we look at in communication, one person or multiple people like in a short list holding on to communication, that can't be good for anybody. I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on, and then Camille, like what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I got a couple of things. I would like to remind you of one of our prime examples of the ability to have enough money to control media and then, jump into political forays. You have former Mayor Bloomberg, who financed his own campaign.
Right.
And it is the Bloomberg we talk about.
Right.
And we go to for that high level information. So the ability to control the market is, at the end of the day, whatever the market is the goal of anybody who's an investor or an active, an active owner in any of these settings. The shrinking of the market is absolutely a concern, right? Mm-hmm. Because the more people you have to be beholden to, or who have the ability to kind of either enforce the standard or challenge the standard, the better, right? You create competition, it's a free market.
Right.
What you end up though with running into is this stagnation of what have we always done? What have we always done? And I want to go back to that corporate lawyer's point. One of the things that, we talk about the value of Twitter, and this is a little bit off topic.
No, it's great.
But we talk about the value of Black Twitter. You best believe the diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics on this deal will not reflect any of the, diversity that you have represented on Twitter. And so that's another reminder, right? That at the end of the day, the people who have the money, people who have established themselves as the go-to players in these scenarios are really just playing with their chess pieces and their toys and trading baseball cards, one way or another. But, as we sit here and talk about it, I'm starting to wonder, like, is this the next 2024 presidential candidate?
No, like, I've seen that.
Are we basically ushering in our third party candidate who actually can win something?
See, Camille, actually, I'm glad you said that, because again, there's that's why I did it, because DeSantis is obviously going for 2024, but I've actually seen people talk about, Elon being a 2024 candidate for president. And I said, that's really fascinating, because you have these two men who are operating, I said my opening, perpendicular exchanges of communication and power. And then so it's like, are we heading towards this thing where we have these, it's almost like there's a destiny of them meeting at some point, whether they're going to be working together or against one another. But I see it because he's as far as Elon is concerned, he's accumulating so much power, and it's going to be so unchecked. And it's like, how do we even defeat? We saw someone like Trump, and Trump is not on the financial scale that someone like Elon is, as far as influence. Yeah, he's famous, and we saw what fame does. And fame actually, and Camille, you're actually really involved in politics. When somebody's popular, it really affects how people perceive their campaign. Whether they have the ability to actually legislate or govern, that's not what's important. It's their popularity. And Elon not only is, immensely popular, but he's accumulating power that we've never really seen before. And this
I agree with you a little fully. And remember that accumulation of power requires you to make the right people's lives and metrics better off. So because mind you, this Twitter deal, everybody's like, oh, we'll see if it closes. Somebody had to get out there to be the one to buy it.
Right.
Once he gets out there and he's willing to buy it at a premium, and if he messes around and closes it, do you know how much money is going to be pouring into him? How much capital he's going to have access to? How many more people will make more money? The fact that you're taking this entity, and I want to make this one point. You mentioned politics and antitrust. There has to be various levels of federal regulatory review before this deal closes.
Right.
Any challenges in that realm helps compete at the 2024 election, because look at this government that won't allow business to be free, the market to be free.
Right.
So he's positioned very well, and I think he's positioned to gain even more support, especially if he could keep the Twitter buyout, take it private, and things run smoothly enough for X number of years. He don't have to be perfect for a long time.
Right.
He got to be perfect, good enough, long enough for the right people to make the right money and see the right outcomes, that he's no longer the villain. But I absolutely agree. This may very well be the third party candidate or a coalescing of powers to just absolutely make sure that the left goes in the loser column in the next couple of elections. But I don't view Elon Musk as a party loyalist, and I think that he will continue to make the metrics work best for him.
Right. I don't know. I don't think so either. And to the point where, and I'm sorry, Tiffany, I'm going to let you jump in here one moment, but I found it fascinating with him that he said a statement that I voted for. It's weird, like it's the whole Barack Obama thing. I would have voted for Barack Obama a third time. Like you saw on Get Out, but he said in 2008 I voted for Barack Obama, but it's not the party that I recognized when I voted in 2008. And then it was like someone brought up this fascinating statement, like, people always talk about how like Democrats have moved further left, which is not actually intrinsically true. In fact, incrementally, they've become more of a centered party. Now, it may not represent in the loudest voices in the room, but politically speaking, that is not true. But the party that's really changed, though, is the Republican Party, where you actually have candidates and people in office who are saying that the 2020 election was fake. That's like their actual platform. And that would not have been a thing 20 years ago, where people would have ran on such an extremist position that elections are fake and that people are, not really voting and all these extreme, but that is in the nomenclature of the Republican narrative that has been, again, we talked about, you said, Camille, caste system of normalizing of the way people see information. I find it fascinating that Elon brought that up to say that, I want to see more. The Democrats have been extreme, but he's ignoring a particular sector of the country or communication that has been identifiably right wing and identifiably extreme, but he hasn't categorized them as extreme. He's only categorized Democrats as being the more extreme party, which I thought was a fascinating statement for a long-term play. You follow me here?
Yes, absolutely. That's the votes he can pick off.
Yeah.
You need to pick them off.
Yeah.
If he's going to be third party, he got to get everybody who's already disillusioned with the Democratic Party to have confidence. And I think this is the thing that we keep running into, is that, talking about the instability that Tiffany pointed out, it's always unstable until you get used to them tremors, right? It's until you get used to it, then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
We move like this, you know, it's a
Yeah.
certain level of noise that we operate with.
Right.
And so once you get people comfortable with challenging the norm that they have ascribed to,
Right.
it's fair game.
Yeah, that's very true.
And one of the things that he said too is that it's this idea that Democrats or the left are more policing. He feels like the right more hates everybody. And he feels like they're being more open, more honest. Just let them say what they need to say. You don't have to like it. And not really taking into account the consequences for that type of speech being rampant, with right, which is going to lend itself hopefully to people wanting more regulations around it, regulations around these as communication platforms, the regulation around the internet itself. And so that is something that it's going to be interesting as you continue down this path of, is it really free speech if it has real life consequences?
Right. So he's normalizing extremist communication to the point where, like, to Camille's point and to your point, Tiffany, that we'll sit there and look at it like, yeah, this is okay. I liken it to like an abusive relationship, right? Like, people look at things and somebody who's in an abusive relationship, like, inside that relationship, this is normal. Yeah, the way they keep hitting me is normal. The way we communicate is normal. This is normal. To outside looking, like, that is not normal. Like, they cannot keep beating up on you like this, and you're like, I don't see it because I'm Stockholm syndrome. I'm used to the way things operate. We're getting to a space to where extremism is the new normal of communication. And then you have somebody propagating this thought that extremism should be normalized in any form of communication is really problematic, because then we've moved the needle to such a place to where if the arbiter of communication is telling you this is normal, then we can't even govern. Like, well, that's not decent. That's not human decency, right?
So Camara, I think the funny thing about this is that your reference this to being a perpendicular path is so hilarious, because we're over here on one side of this conversation analyzing scenario where the left is too policing, and
right.
So we need to take Twitter private and preserve whatever chance we have to have public free speech. But then on the right side, we've got Governor DeSantis and the Don't Say Gay bill, and the storm that any level of opposition has come from it, in addition to book banning and the like, where again we so support free speech except for this speech right here. And so the hypocrisy of it all is not lost on me. And it's so frustrating, because it's like we are left as intelligent American citizens required to be able to dissect those two things and not see the hypocrisy in them.
Right. Tiffany, what are your thoughts?
Man, I think that's true. I was just on Twitter earlier today and I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, who tweeted this picture that goes, it's a meme that says, "What's so hard to understand? There's two genders." Mm-hmm. And so if you think about actual science and, gender and sex and the nuances in that, the fact that people don't know that there were most people that I saw, of course, from my feed were like against it. But the idea that people are like, yes, I'm a white, male, heterosexual Christian, and this is what I want to see. You're like, but that's great that that's what you want to see. There's also some truth to, this idea of what actually defines gender and sex. And so again, it's this moderation of how can you pick and choose what pieces of something that is real that you want to talk about and see, and who controls that. That is so scary.
Right.
That's just so crazy. And that is where we are. Who controls this data? Who controls what we can see, and who's going to be able to help to balance that?
So I think we should go ahead and leave it there. I want to give you guys your final thoughts on, like, what we talked about, just communication and or anything like how we talked about it. Give me your final thoughts on this. I'll start with you, Camille, if you're okay. You're ready to do that.
Yeah, no, my thank you again for having me. It's been a pleasure to speak with Tiffany too. We haven't met, but I'm excited to learn more about her and what she's doing. But my final thoughts here are, just don't get misled by the tweet, right?
Yeah,
That's
right.
my final thought.
Right.
Don't get misled by the tweet. Do a deeper dive and be informed. I think that we require, we should require as much diligence of ourselves as we want our leaders to have. And the reality is that anybody can take a public company private with the right amount of money. And, there comes a point where we are wasting our productive time focusing on what everybody else is executing. And so I encourage us to continue to, carve out our own spaces in these transactions and in these platforms to make sure that, we're not just part of the commodity that's being, assigned and transferred versus having our own. But I think that there is much to come from this. It's going to be good theater at least. And, I look forward to hearing how this all plays out. But I don't think, if I'm a betting woman, I'm going to say 50% of the 2 deals we talked about today don't close. I'm not sure which one. I think 50. I think one of them definitely ain't finna close. And I might say 0%, but I'm gonna be wise and go with 50. I'm gonna go with it's a possible.
I actually would agree with that, but I actually think it's gonna be Twitter that's gonna one that closes. Personally speaking,
that would be the one I would bet on.
Yeah, Tiffany, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. When Camille was talking about, owning our own spaces, maybe Miss Black Planet, and right, the amount of data that was there,
so,
and how important.
We didn't talk about Black. I'm sorry. I know we went to the club, but Black Planet. That's fascinating. Like, why can't Black people? Why haven't we moved into a space of owning our own spaces? Like, what is stopping us? And I'm sorry, I'm supposed to close, but I really wanted to ask this question. So, just indulge me for a moment, like to really explore that. Like, why don't you think we've done that?
I think it's going to take the right person that's going to be more cutthroat, right? If you look at, is it Byron Allen that owns the Weather Channel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And how he's been able to move in the media space. You need somebody that really understands the space, the cutthroatness of business, and understanding the value. And I think the thing with Black Planet was not understanding the value and how to monetize it, probably. I don't know the story of Black Planet. But somebody has to be able to do what's necessary to build the platform, own it, not sell out fast, get the investment needed to really take it forward. But all of these social media networks is just databases, UI. Like, you got to get the infrastructure in place. You got to get the thing running properly. But there's so much space out there. And I think people are looking for it. It just needs to be more advertised. Like, the way people jump on Clubhouse should show that there is room to build something new.
Right. Like, and it's funny that Clubhouse is funny because it died out really quickly. It was like a phoenix. It came up so quick and then it died out. But I was fascinated by Clubhouse because it would seem like all our folks, I'm talking about Black folks, were all on Clubhouse, but Clubhouse was not Black owned. And so, like, we actually propped up this social media platform that was all our intuitiveness and conversations and communication, but we weren't even in the benefit of that. Like, and I'm fascinated. Like, why is it that we cannot create a platform? Because clearly people follow us wherever we go. So what is stopping it? I don't know what the impetus is going to be. Is it we need certain amount of I would say celebrity stakeholders to say, hey, we're all over here now. Everybody's over here. The Beyoncés, the Cardi B's, even the Travis Scott, whatever. Like, whomever to say, popularity stakeholders say, hey, we're over here now. Let's communicate on this particular app. Maybe that's what it is. The same way Jay-Z told everybody to stop buying, stop buying this particular and start drinking, Ace of Spades. You know what I mean? So, like, maybe that's what it is. The social cachet needs to be there. But I don't know why, because I know when Elon was first prompted, everybody was like, where are we going? Where are we going? Nobody had an answer. Nobody knew where to go. Everybody's like, I don't know where to go. And I'll just wait till everybody else is going. But nobody was like, hey, I have this app over here. that's the same or better than Twitter that hasn't really been utilized yet. Black owned. Let's all try to communicate on that side, and I don't know why that hasn't happened.
They missed a moment. That was a perfect moment. They could have called. They should have got Issa Rae on the phone and been like, Issa, I know you in media and music, and you got content. Promote this. And I don't know if it's not there or people were not ready. I agree. They missed the movement.
They missed the opportunity. Go ahead, Camille.
I think it's a couple of things. First of all, if you're going to get somebody, some big name stakeholders in there, you got to get them equity. Yeah. And you got to get them into financing, and you got to be a part of that. And then you got to negotiate that. So most of our platforms don't have the initial capital to spend on those kind of deals, let alone the reinforcements to execute them, and not go through a whole bunch of, takeover and mission questioning. But I think also to the point of where's everybody going to go, you got to find users. You got to get user traction to make this go viral, to make whatever it is go viral. And I mean, I've heard of Rapid Social, I've heard of Fan Base, I've heard of another one that's not coming to mind, that are new efforts at trying to, help people of color monetize and have their own social media platform. And again, you got to convince everybody who's on Twitter, TikTok, whatever, to take some of their screen time and transition it. And they've got to build relationships and a presence and learn your system and everything. And getting users to not, give up before they finish that onboarding is a real tall task that, takes a lot of, presence and reassurance. Like I'm interested, for example, it's not Black owned, but Robinhood, what's Robinhood's success and user rate at this point compared to, a couple years ago?
Actually, Robinhood, there was an article that came out that they actually lost a lot of money in this last, because people, a lot of people who are like normal people, not high level investors, they lost a lot of money in the market in the last couple weeks. I was, you guys watch Billions, and there's another show on Showtime called The Rise of Uber. It's talked about the Uber. It talks about Uber, basically the creation of Uber, and I was fascinated watching. There's a lot of things to pull from it. One of the things I thought about was like, man, like this guy really created Uber because he saw there was a need of the ride sharing service that wasn't being implemented because people were tired of taking taxis, especially Black people. He talked about Black people in New York and minorities. Taxis were passing them by, and he was like, there's a market there, and there's something there, and he is very exploitative. And then he got investors to buy into the idea that there's actually a market or a place for ride sharing services. And I thought to myself, why, especially in Silicon Valley, why are there no Black investors, or not even Black investors, but like really no Black, hedge fund managers? There are, but like there's a few, but like I was thinking, like, if somebody came with an idea and like, I want to create this space, where are the tech bros in that look like us that are going to really, create spaces or a new social app phenomenon that I don't see? Not just like on the lower scale. I'm talking about creating the next Uber, creating the next Twitter. You're laughing, Camille. Like, what's so funny?
Because we was wrapping up, and I'm not going to go into a whole other session with you about this right now. But I mean, it's the same way we can't get access to capital to buy a house. People are doing metrics. Data drives everything.
Right.
Those private equity, those private capital, VC funds, they are reviewing financials that have a certain level of metrics that they've got to achieve, and that they are very committed to achieving. And remember, they're hunting for unicorns. They're not hunting for mid-grade. They're hunting for unicorns. And if they're hunting for unicorns, 9 times out of 10, their confidence in somebody who looks like you and I, bringing them and executing a unicorn is very, very low. However, if you bring a colleague who has the same alum status or various other connections, or even took some other company halfway there, right, that has the support or the recommendation of an esteemed colleague,
right,
you're more likely to you look at the public the private equity space. the representation of minorities is probably, it is worse than it is in tech. And neither of them are anything to write at home about.
Right.
So that's why you're not getting both. You're not going to get an alignment of there, where you have limited alignments of those strategies, because we're not generally viewed as the carriers of unicorns.
Which is fascinating, because we are viewed as the carriers of communication and interest and popularity. So why can't we be the carriers of this thing but not the other? I think that's a very fascinating, and that's another podcast in of itself, to explore.
Yeah.
But I really do feel like we already know there's value in the Black experience, but is there value in somebody commoditizing the Black experience exclusively? I think so, but why hasn't anybody done that yet? You
see it all the time in entertainment.
Yeah.
It's the exact same model. Yeah. We are absolutely the content. We are seldom the owners.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, Tiffany. I know I stole your thunder on your closing thought. Is there something you wanted to communicate that I jumped on top of it? I'm sorry.
No. For your Black VC conversation, though, I think there's a organization called Black VC that is training and bringing up Black VCs. There is Arlen Hamilton that does a lot of investing. There's Felicia Hatcher that's leading Pharrell Williams' Black Ambition Fund. And so I think those are all people that can definitely have that conversation with you. I don't know this side. I was just wrapping up with the fact that, one, we need to be more, the creating of our own platforms, following the model to really launch those platforms successfully, and following that model where, technical founders may not do that, but it's really needed. And so I think people need to have that encouragement to keep going if that's something you were thinking about doing to really, make it work. Two is going to be we need people to be more civically engaged. And so as you're seeing with Ron DeSantis and even with Elon, and just this idea of content moderation, of, new laws needing to be written, and people just need to be more engaged overall, because some of this can be impacted, I think, at that level. And three is really support movements like Fix the Feed, where that's a coalition of 60 organizations that's really talking about fixing these algorithms, protecting people equally, and, showing us the receipts, right? Disclosing business models and moderation practices. And so when you think about this topic, I think those kind of work together, where people in general just need to be more aware of where their data is going and more aware of what's happening in politics and the laws that are being written and unwritten, I guess.
Dope. So I'm sorry, what was that, Camille?
No, I just said that part. When she said unwritten, I was like, that part.
Yeah, no doubt. So I like to end every program on just a love letter to Black people. And so, dear Black people, we just got done having a thoughtful dialogue on the objectives of just not only social media and conversations, but also these egotistical white men and their endeavors. And we find ourselves doing an evaluating of how, not only the how, but the why, and ultimately how these actions will affect our community. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I thought it was actually incredible. And, something that made me think about just the value of, ourselves in this new data world, and our that value of our experiences. I will tell you that as long as the world spins on its axis, rich, powerful men will have their say in how the world should operate and how they should curate communication, for nothing else than to express the idioms of their own personal wants and needs. I'm not sure there's a clear identifiable way to avoid their narcissistic path of destruction, even if it's going to this path of, at least at the 2024 election. But what should be evident is how both these men and men of their ilk have displayed their actions and shown nothing more than an exhibition of their ego, or better term, I should say, an exhibition of their ego tripping. So with that being said, we're going to ride out with this song. And I appreciate y'all for listening to this podcast, and we are out.